would like to introduce Dr. Pamela Gay.
I feel like saying now for something entirely different. I'm going to be talking about basically the last 10 years of my career. Because about 10 years ago, a graduate student at the University of Arizona, Hannah Thackeray, called me up and said, "So I heard you like citizen science. How do you feel about rocks?" Hannah knew I'd developed a platform, CosmoQuest, that was designed to allow everyday people to help NASA scientists map out other worlds. We'd taken on Vesta, the moon, Mars, a variety of places, and Hannah knew this because she'd been one of my volunteers. And now she was a NASA-funded researcher with a world of her own, Bennu. Hannah had joined the OSIRIS-REx mission, and they needed to find a safe place to grab a sample and bring it home. The timeline to go from OSIRIS-REx sending us images to mapping all the hazards on Bennu was measured in weeks. In order for the mission to be able to accomplish that, they were going to need help. And I said CosmoQuest could help. From conversations to negotiations to contracts to launch, it took years. And then, one day, I was in a university parking lot at 4 a.m. Launch was the next day, and my team was going to drive from St. Louis to Cape Canaveral in one long go. This was not our intention. We had wanted to leave the previous day. However, one of my students' professors said, "My class is more important than your launch." And he was not about to be swayed. So we waited, and we left super early in the morning. We celebrated dawn at Waffle House, as you do. And we took the second highway to the Cape and drove straight on till evening. Nothing prepared me for the launch the next day. I had seen plenty of launches, space shuttles, deltas, but this was the first launch I was part of. When the sound waves shake your body as your mission takes off and emerges from that cloud, a rush hits you. From that first moment of liftoff until confirmation that it made it to space safely, you feel every single emotion. And I don't care how small my role was in OSIRIS-REx. In that moment, that was my mission. And I felt everything. There was the, oh my God, this is so amazing. There was this technology is everything, and I can't wait to be part of what's going to happen. And there's that part they don't prepare you for. The part that is, please don't blow up. I want to keep my job, and you are funding me. They don't warn you about that, but it's a very real feeling. But that day, it was blue skies and green status lights and easy flying. And then it was time to get to work. Our part of the mission was to write software to make it possible to mark all the things on Bennu, to measure the lengths of boulders, to mark the points of rocks, to circle craters. We were trying to find that safe place to land, but there was one problem. We didn't actually have any images of Bennu because nothing had visited Bennu in the past. But Bennu wasn't the first near-Earth asteroid that was going to have a sample taken. That title went to a cashew-shaped asteroid named Itokawa. And when Hayabusa 1 got to Itokawa, they found a little bit of everything. There were fields of car-sized boulders. There were dusty plains, perfect to imagine landing on. There were craters so pristine they looked like something straight out of a simulation. This was a dream of an asteroid, and I am a dreamer. And we decided we would use images of this asteroid to plan out everything we were doing. Now, we made a whole lot of assumptions. We assumed that Bennu would look just like Itokawa. We designed an interface where when people asked us, how long is it going to take to map out Bennu? We took images of Itokawa and shoved it into the interface, and we had students and volunteers, and basically anyone who got a little too close, sit down and map out the locations of those rocks, the lengths of those boulders, circling those craters. And it took 2 to 3 minutes per image of Itokawa. We'd have 5,000 images of Bennu with a few thousand volunteers. We could be done in a week. If we asked multiple people to look at every image so that we could confirm the results one person against the other, it would take us a couple of weeks, no big deal. We were going to complete this project on time. Easy peasy, based on assuming Bennu would look like Itokawa. You know what they say about assumptions. On New Year's Eve 2019, our mission had a date with an asteroid. Is it possible to catfish yourself? I feel like we catfished ourselves. Bennu was not the space rock of our dreams. Of the smooth fields where we had imagined OSIRIS-REx going down and grabbing a sample, there were none. Of large, safe spaces, Hannah, if you're out there anywhere, it turns out I hate rocks. I have always hated rocks. And I really hated rocks after this project. If you were to imagine an interplanetary gravel truck carrying a load of boulders and gravel and dumping it in outer space, that is what this asteroid looked like. At first glance, nowhere looked safe enough to grab a rock. At second glance, nowhere looked safe enough for our spacecraft, and we would have to redefine a safe place to grab a sample. But luckily, that was not my problem. My problem was convincing people to help us map out Bennu. The average image of Bennu had a few dozen boulders, a few hundred rocks. And craters were just places where the rocks were flattened and smashed a little bit smaller in a circular area. I did not want to map these images. When the first day came to open up our software to the public, thousands of people showed up. And I mean, can you imagine telling your friends, hey, I got to help NASA researchers find the place where a spacecraft touched down, grabbed a sample. I was part of that. They showed up, but that doesn't mean they stayed. It really does not mean they stayed. They showed up, they took the tutorial where I kept those dreamy Itokawa images. And then they saw their first image of Bennu, and about half of them left. It was bad, and so we turned to Twitch and we made memes. I and my team members took turns sitting on this live streaming platform mapping Bennu while challenging everyone watching to join us, to come hate map Bennu along with us. And it turns out video game players who are used to grinding in-game for resources are exactly who you want when you're trying to do tasks like this. It is way easier to map rocks in Bennu than it is to dig up diamonds in Minecraft. So we invited folks to join us. And instead of finding creepers and zombies to blow up their progress, they found grateful scientists like me, who admittedly sometimes looked like zombies because none of us were sleeping a lot during this process. Of the folks that stayed past the tutorial, most did about 10 images. It took more than a week to complete this project. Thank God for the hate mappers. You see, there was a small cadre. Figuring out how to start videos is always a challenge. There was a small, wonderful cadre of human beings who spent their days hate mapping Bennu, because Bennu was not allowed to win. It was not allowed to have any rocks that failed to be measured and documented. And for 92 days, we mapped. And we found people who'd grind away with us, clicking on those rocks, tracing those boulders, circling those. We hoped they were craters. 7 of our volunteers marked over 1,000 images each. I don't know how. I made it into the hundreds. We did science. We hated Bennu. I'm not going to lie. We still hate Bennu. And we found community along the way. We found family. And in those 92 days, nearly 4,000 people marked 14 million rocks, boulders, and craters. The site selection team used this data along with data from other of the mission teams to identify 4 potentially safe places to land and grab a sample. And on December 12th, 2019, my birthday of all days, we learned Osiris Rex would be touching its sample arm into the rocks of Nightingale Crater. This was a feature that had been mapped by 64 of our volunteers. My job was done. I literally went to Disney World. My intention was to be at a launch that day, and the lights weren't green. For me, this is where the story ended. But for much of the Osiris Rex team, this is where things just got started. With the sample site selected, the plan was that Osiris Rex would gratefully come down out of its pseudo-orbit around Bennu, grab a sample, and then bounce away. This video shows what was expected, what was assumed to be our future. You'd think we'd learn about making assumptions. We did not. Come on, go to the next video. You can do it. On October 20th, 2020, our spacecraft punched an asteroid. Bennu has the consistency of a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit. Our spacecraft could, if it had wanted to, and had it not had retro rockets, gone straight into this asteroid. Luckily, our retro rockets did zip us back, and a massive sample was in arm, on spacecraft, and just about everywhere else. On September 24th, 2023, a sample capsule returned to Earth as our renamed spacecraft, now OSIRIS APEX, took off towards another asteroid. All the dirt you see here, scattered across the top of our sample capsule, that's 70 grams of extra material from Bennu that came along for the ride. It was hoped by the mission team that the mission would bring back 60 grams. The spare material was in excess of the original hoped for amount of material. But all the screws you see in this image, that's the lid over the actual sample that we meant to collect. inside, beneath all those screws that were way too hard to get off, there was 249 grams of bits of asteroid. 70% of the sample is being saved for later, when hopefully technology will allow us to study things in new and more interesting ways. Analysis continues. This is a sample high in carbon. There is water. The science was and is amazing. But while this was going on, the world was facing a struggle we hadn't imagined was coming in December 2019, when we learned about the landing site while waiting in line for rides at Disney. On January 22nd, 2020, 2 nights after I had returned from presenting at an American Astronomical Society meeting, I lay in bed, jet-lagged but unable to sleep. I was doom scrolling Twitter. Those last couple of nights at the meeting in Hawaii, my collaborators and I, my friends and I, had talked about how glad we were that we'd be leaving Hawaii ahead of whatever that weird flu was that we were learning about that was happening in China. How little had we known what was coming. That night, as I chased a still unnamed virus across Twitter hashtags, I learned that a city of 11 million people was getting completely locked down in hopes of protecting China and protecting the world from that virus escaping. We now know that the drastic measures did save the people of Wuhan, but that virus did escape. It still circulates the world. And as the weeks passed and as the virus and lockdowns propagated around the world, the people in our CosmoQuest astronomy community began to talk less and less about science and more about their fears. The COVID pandemic happened at a weird time in our programs. At the end of the American Astronomical Society, when we were done presenting, we took all of our citizen science programs down. We still had our podcasts, we still had our community. We wanted to do a complete rebuild of our software. We were at a lull in our funding, so I was the only paid programmer on the project. I had an amazing, and I still have an amazing team of open source developers I'm working with. And we were implementing user requests, we were doing cool things, and it felt like we were weeks, maybe at most a couple months away from releasing a big new project. As conversations, though, went by, I kept hearing over and over people asking, do you know anyone who's sick? What are the shortages where you are? Are you running out of toilet paper too? Our development team wasn't interested in developing. Our science team was struggling figuring out, how do I homeschool? How do I work from home? How do I plan a mission remotely? No one really had time for citizen science. And in that moment, in February 2020, I had a choice. I could do what I was supposed to do according to my profession. I could drive my team of volunteers to work on software so people could continue our never-ending effort to map the moon, which would still be there after the pandemic, it turns out. Or I could do what I did and pull together our community and ask, are you okay? How can we help? They were not okay. Folks were struggling with isolation as they went from living vibrant lives to working from home and school from home situations. There were a lot of people living alone whose only community was what they found online, what they found in CosmoQuest. Adulting became hard, and people were struggling to get up in the morning, to go to bed at night, to shower and put on clothes that weren't pajamas. and people were afraid they were going to get sick and die alone. And by people, I cannot hold myself separate. I may share my house with a husband, and we may have had an international graduate student living with us during the pandemic. But the whole failing to sleep and living in pajamas, I am just as guilty as everyone else. So we laid out a plan of purposeful compassion. In our community of people who learn and do science, we knew no one could function. No one could learn and no one could do science if we were all too busy being angry and afraid. This was the first lesson I had learned when I was learning to be an instructor, a professor. No one can learn when they're hurting. And this was the most important lesson I took into 2020 and beyond. We put the humans first. We built ourselves a home and even a scale model of the solar system in Minecraft. We talked about the latest science news, and we talked about how we were doing. We remembered that as long as everyone leans in, no one can fall over. And we learned how to survive. Except not all of us did. This is the thing graduate school and 10 years of being a professor never prepared me for. As the leaders of communities, we are teachers and mentors and problem solvers. And sometimes we're the people with the emergency phone numbers. Sometimes we're the ones who have to call a family and say, I'm sorry. I don't know how to tell you that we think they're gone. I want you to know they may have lived alone, but they were never alone. We lost 2 people. But we also saw 1 wedding. And we saw so many rebirths as people reinvented themselves, as we reinvented ourselves. And that reinvention started with 1 cursed project. All right, here are the gritty details. I'm going to go over this quickly because most of you will not care. We originally wrote CosmoQuest back in 2011 in PHP. As the project grew, we adapted to the Laravel framework, so some of our tools could take advantage of libraries written by other people. But students do not learn PHP in the classroom, and they really do not learn how to use frameworks. So when we started working with more and more students, we switched everything over to Python, which I hate personally. And it turns out Python was not meant for writing websites. So when we were done with Bennu and we were done with hating on rocks and we had a moment to breathe and I was the only person being paid to write software, I decided it's time to go back to our PHP roots, start using JavaScript more efficiently, and figure out how to deal with a whole lot of legacy code. But development was cursed. We got a new grant. It was a super awesome project. 2 members of our team had their dads die, and that was just the start of how this project was cursed. And it turns out that getting delayed was ultimately a grace. Here's the other thing you need to know. CosmoQuest is home to a vibrant queer community. We have lots of people with disabilities, and if I'm being honest, we have a large queer disabled community. Conversations constantly crop up around issues of inclusion, disability, bullying, ethics, philosophy. These are just part of what we talk about late at night as we're mapping other worlds and building them in Minecraft. And the Monday after Trump was elected, we lost a trans member of our community to suicide. The project was cursed. I pushed forward, writing code, trying to move past everything going on, trying to move past the politics of the movement. It sometimes felt like nothing was going right. My institution was having IT issues. A second grant I got to do another citizen science project was slow getting awarded. Things that were supposed to launch before Christmas 2024 did not. I honestly just wanted to hide under a rock. But on January 20th, as I sat in an online meeting with other professors and academics and colleagues doing our job, we were trying to get stuff done as we watched DEI restrictions come down, as we knew friends who were suddenly getting their projects canceled in the moment. And I realized I could not launch a federally funded project on CosmoQuest, because it would mean taking offline our support of diverse communities. And I will not do that. So I called my collaborators, and I started writing new code from scratch. I set up a new URL, mappers.psi.edu, and I moved beyond CosmoQuest to build something federally funded and separate that has no issues abiding with whatever executive order might be coming our way. And this is where it becomes CosmoQuest and beyond. On January 20th, I decided it was time for me to learn how to write a JavaScript app in Vue and develop new APIs and leverage Okta for authentication. I decided it was time to take all the best practices in software development that I had learned at conferences and leverage this as an opportunity to build something new, free of the hindrances of legacy code, and start over. I want to be clear, had I been running on schedule for the two projects I had funded, I could have faced choices of deleting DEI content or risking my grants. I had to explain to one program officer, no, actually, we don't have DEI content now. This was a real pivot that was necessary to maintain a community that mattered and to do science that matters. In the spring, we began testing World Mappers, our new platform for doing fully online citizen science. Like our prior CosmoQuest platform, we differentiate ourselves from other platforms by allowing for much more sophisticated and complicated tutorials that make it possible for people to learn how to do nuanced tasks involving surface science of other worlds. We aren't a platform that will ever have millions of people passing through our URLs. We're gonna have thousands of people who are interested in hate mapping rocks. Right now, we have 2 live projects, one that went live to full fanfare with NASA last week, and one that was supposed to do so on October 15th, and now we don't know when, but it's live, so when the government comes back, we will have a platform. Our first activity is part of our new lunar melt project. We are inviting folks like you to join us in mapping out the terrain around Little Lowell Crater. This is a crater near Tycho Crater, that big bright crater in the lower left of the moon when you look at it from here in the northern hemisphere. Little Lowell Crater is one that has visible melt features. Melt is something that just naturally happens when you slam an asteroid into the moon. Stuff melts. But this particular region had just the right combination of energy and material to create this really awesome ooey gooey lava that was capable of pushing boulders, of flowing over craters but not completely filling them in. And it did things that allow our team researchers to measure the depths of the melt fields and to start to get at things like what was the viscosity and do really cool dynamical models of what happens when you slam a rock into the moon. This is just part one. Part two will allow us to map out larger scale flow features, looking at how lava moved across the surface of the moon and see how it filled in features and ponded. And it turns out you guys here in Idaho have really cool volcanic features near here. And flying in, I just kept thinking about this project and how I now want to do the Grand Tetons and Rockies version as well. That's a different project that doesn't exist. What does exist is another human versus machine kind of project. Since 2006, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has been going round and round Mars, taking images with its context camera. Over the years, it has collected multiple global mosaics that allow us to look at Mars in different lighting conditions, in different seasons, and to see how things have changed over time, where landslides have cascaded down crater walls, where dunes have migrated in the face of winds, where new craters have formed. But the problem is that when you use the automated software to mosaic together the landscapes, it looks like a quilt of images. And you get these harsh edges where the backgrounds don't mesh correctly. Your phone has better mosaicing software available to it than scientists had available to them. And so our research team worked to build new software that could go through and automatically mosaic these images together with pixel perfect alignment from one mosaic to another, we hope. But just like the software that you use to stitch together vacation vistas might sometimes make something that was rather Picasso, there's the concern that our software can do the same thing. And sometimes those picture perfect, pixel perfect alignments aren't so pixel perfect. And pixel perfect matters when you're trying to map things out to a latitude, longitude system. So we wrote an interface that allows people to go in and look at two different images and say, yes, these actually are put together healthy, nothing went Picasso, and then to look at the difference image and make sure they actually do line up. And you can blink them as well. That was harder to capture for a slide. And the reason that we need human beings to do this is it turns out that machine learning algorithms still aren't capable of doing this without a lot of training data. And by the time we had enough training data, the project would have been done. So let's just ask you to do it. The problem is that, sure, in this image, the sun is at basically the same angle for both of these examples. When you take a difference, you get a mostly gray background. Looks great. But you'd get the same lack of detailed background if you looked at two not aligned desert fields. But your eyes can often pick up on little nuances that say, yes, this is actually not aligned. Or it could have been these two images were taken at different times of day with the shadows in different places. And that would suddenly show up in the difference image as two very different images. But it wasn't that things were offset. It was that the sun did what the sun appears to do, and as Mars rotated, the shadows changed. So we ask people, you, to come and help us do science. And that's the thing about the kind of citizen science that we do. We're completing projects where there isn't training data, where there isn't the possibility of leveraging the machine, of leveraging AI or machine learning. We are asking human beings to help us find the scientifically interesting places to explore and the safe places to land our instruments of the future. And we're here. And we have a community where all are welcome. And as long as we all lean in, we can support each other, and no one will fall down. We live in interesting times, but let's choose to find joy and do science together. Thank you.
All right, any questions? She can ask a question if she has one.
You can ask me anything about the solar system. Go ahead. Oh yeah, we will always be. The moon is really big. We're currently mapping out little old crater, but once we're done with that, we have plenty of other places we want to go mapping. New volunteers are always welcome. So let me go back to the slide with the URLs. It's actually still up there. I did good. Okay. Yeah, come map with us.
Anything else?
So the issue that was identified is you're gonna have people who come in and fixate and do amazing work. And then you're going to have people, sometimes including yourself, who come in and are just like, yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done right now, I'm going to wander away. So how do we quality check? And you never know when like a cat is gonna jump on somebody's keyboard or something. The way we do this is we always have multiple people look at every image. And it turns out mistakes are pretty unique unless you have something really wrong with your tutorial. And so when something is only marked by one person, it's usually because either it's super subtle and that one person is one of your top users who does amazing work. And you've probably flagged their account as use them to compare things. There's always these people. They're amazing. They're our heroes. And then there's the clicks by somebody's 3-year-old, somebody's dog, somebody's cat, somebody who is really tired, someone who was assigned to do this as their homework and does not care. And their unique misclicks, quick clicks, I just need to turn in 25 clicks for my homework, those will be unique. And so when 6 people, 15 people, depending on how hard the project is, all look at the same image, you look for the things marked by multiple people, and you throw out the things that are done uniquely by people who don't have a high confidence level in what they're doing. Statistics is a wonderful thing. Other questions? Littlest one. Mom or dad may need to be loud for them.
We can bring a mic over.
The question was, do I get to take any pictures of Jupiter? There is a project called JunoCam that hopefully some of you know about. It is a project that uses a camera on the Juno spacecraft, and all of us are invited to use the mission data to create brilliant color images of the things that this mission has had a chance to look at. And so I've used the data from JunoCam and then become quickly convinced other people are far better at it than I am, and so I look at their stuff. But all of us can go to JunoCam and use mission data to look at Jupiter. And citizen scientists have enabled us to learn things we never knew about Jupiter. It's really an amazing project. Oh, that's so sweet. I like that. Other questions?
All right. Well, let's please thank our speaker once again.